and you give them no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way, in order to save his life, that wicked person shall die for his iniquity, but his blood I will require at your hand. And verse 19 says, but if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness or from his wicked way, he shall die for his iniquity, but you will have delivered your soul. That is a charge to a watchman. Go back to Ezekiel Chapter 1. You got to see this. This is an image. Whether you've ever put your eyes on this before, it's something you can imagine or have seen. So Ezekiel is a young man, about 30 years old. He's passionate for Israel. He has a passion for Israel, and his desire is to be a priest in Israel. And he loves his people, he loves his God, and he wants to serve. And God calls him and kind of changes the direction and the path that he's on. So starting in verse 4, this is what Ezekiel saw. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. All right. Now, because we live in a time where there's plenty of science fiction imagery that we all grew up with, here is a storm cloud brewing, and it becomes tumultuous. And out of it you start seeing what you would normally expect to see in severe storm clouds, lightning and flashes, but fire now. And in this fire and this bright activity, there's something starts to appear, and it looks like metal. Yay! That's here. Good. Right on cue, Linda. Your ears must be ringing. So I've named the lesson Independence Day. And I alluded to this a while ago, last year, when we looked at Ezekiel. And I said there were a lot of people have this idea and this fantasy about Ezekiel and Ezekiel's vision here in chapter 1 about the alien spaceship coming down. And here it is. But we've come a long way since last year, Tina, haven't we? And we've seen this image before. So it should look kind of familiar to us in some form. But you're out and you see the sky change dramatically, and it gets your attention. Now, look at verse 5. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had human likeness. But each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings and on their 4 sides they had human hands, and of the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them went out straight forward without turning as they went. As for the likeness of their faces, each had a human face. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side. The 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. The 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. And their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies. So each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went. without turning as they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures darted to and fro like the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the four of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like gleaming of beryl, that's a precious stone, and their four had the same likeness. Their appearance was in construction being as it were a wheel within a wheel. And they went in any of the four directions without turning as they went. Now, it's hard to picture this, but whatever it is, it's awesome. But I was thinking, sometimes I can read this and I think of a drone. Right? Ever see how drones move? And how they have those different wheels and spinning. They're all different types. So we think, you could see how people think a spaceship, some kind of, it's some kind of machinery, but then it's not a machine. It looks like it's got wheels. It's hard to take all this in. But now, it says in verse 18, their rims were tall and awesome, and the rims of all four were full of eyes all around. Oh. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those rose from the earth, the wheels rose along with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Now, verse 22. Over the heads of the living creatures there was a likeness of an expanse, shining like awe-inspiring crystal, spread out above their heads. Now I'll put this image in your head. Who would know this? I can't think of it. I can't think of it. Starman. Do you remember the movie Starman? Do you remember the spaceship in that movie? And what it looked like almost was, it was like something that was reflecting the sky. So you couldn't really see what the object was, but you could see, its image was reflecting something else. Kind of like some of the stealth technology that you've seen in movies where to hide something, what it really does is it projects what's on the other side of it, but as it moves, it distorts the scenery. And so that one was this big disc that came down, but so here you have this thing, it's in this expanse, and anyways, it's, wow. I don't know how from Ezekiel's perspective you see this, but I want you, for those of us who just went through the book of Revelation together, this is a vision he's getting, and what he's doing is he's attempting to describe what he sees. And so, verse 23, and under the expanse their wings were stretched out one toward another, and each creature had two wings covering its body. 24. And when they went, I heard the sound of their wings like the sound of many waters, the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult, like the sound of an army. When they stood still, they let down their wings. Whatever this thing is, it is terrifying. It's some call it a war wagon, but it's the chariot of God. But it's not, you think of the old sci-fi line, I come in peace. Take me to your leader. This thing is not coming in peace. This is a terrifying, so I say it's a calamity. When chapter 1, we're going to go into 3 chapters of Ezekiel. Chapter 1 is the calamity. What it is God's glory, but it's in the midst of a calamity, and we're going to find out quickly why that is. But it's awesome. It's terrifying. The sound it makes, just, you don't know what to do. And so in verse 26 it says, and above the expanse over their heads there was a likeness of a throne. And again, it's hard for us to picture this because remember, Irene, we said this, we're looking at the vision in Revelation, and how can you see anything if there's just bright fire, right, coming out, or bright shining like the strength of the sun? Well, if you look at the sun, how can you see anything else? But again, here's what Ezekiel sees. This is the vision that he has. He says, there was a likeness, verse 26, of a throne in appearance like sapphire. Miriam, does that ring a bell? Sapphire, like sapphire? And seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness of a human appearance. So there's a throne and someone's on the throne. Verse 27, and upward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire, enclosed all around. Man, imagine, how do you describe this, right? What you're seeing. It's brilliant, it's glowing, and this again is above all the other tumult that was happening underneath it. But now he says, I see this, and the person on the throne he's divided by the center, and it's like gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what the appearance of the waist I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was brightness around him. In verse 28, so like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud of the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness all around. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, and when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. So we were just looking at this morning, Paul's recounting when he was knocked down on his road to Damascus, and typically what we see in the presence of God's glory is we become wax, and we melt, and we fall to the ground, and just like we saw Miriam in the Revelation, right? And then either the angel has to touch you or speak to you, fear not, get on your feet, don't be afraid, because your reaction is to be afraid. But this is a calamity that's happening. In the midst of this calamity, something striking appeared. Did you see what it was? Something really striking appeared. It's what's coming is judgment. The glory of God is justice, but also mercy. Did you see the bow? Remember when we were looking at the throne, the rainbow around it? And where do we see the rainbow? Well, he says like in the day of Noah, right? What does that tell us? It's God's mercy. God puts the rainbow from the beginning of this story, tells us, I put the bow in the sky so I will see it. And God will remember his covenant, his mercy, his love. And in the last book, in the book of Revelation, we see the rainbow, the mercy of God in that revelation. And here, it's present even in the midst of this calamity, the glory of God. What will it take for us to respect God and his will for us? So Ezekiel is striving to be a priest to honor God, to teach God's people, the people he loves and was brought up to love. And God intervenes here, and he takes Ezekiel and he changes the path of his life. Alice, we've been saying in our Wednesday class, we've been going through Genesis, and we've just come to the end where Jacob blesses the boys. And one of the things we remark about is how God's man is there, Joseph, but what did God do in his appearance to Pharaoh that elicited such respect and trust that Pharaoh would set up this Hebrew and give him authority over what would become the first world empire, Egypt? Something incredible. And Ezekiel is given this vision, and it's a calamity for sure. In the midst of it, he sees the mercy of God. All right, you got my attention. In chapter 2, we see he speaks to Ezekiel and he identifies him as Son of Man. He said, chapter 2, verse 1, he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet and I will speak with you. Because apparently he wouldn't have power to stand on his feet unless God told him to. But stand on your feet. And as he spoke to me, the Spirit entered into me and set me on my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I send you to the people of Israel, to nations of rebels who have rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me to this very day. What Ezekiel is going to get, what we would say is a crash course on the condition of man. And you wouldn't expect this cue from Israel, right? But it's hard for us to imagine the scene here, that here's a young man that has so much hope for his people and is desirous to serve God and serve Israel, and God's going to call him out of this calamity because of, right now, you have Ezekiel on the heels of Jeremiah the prophet, and Jeremiah has been telling Jerusalem, you're going to go by way of Babylon, and they're basically running him out of town, saying, no, God would never allow anybody to come in and take Jerusalem. Well, they do. They subdue it. Ezekiel is now living in this environment where Jerusalem is about to fall. Babylon has already come in and, taken prisoners, and Ezekiel is there. Now, what do I do? And again, I'm saying this today because if you think things are bad in our world today, we need to learn something here. And it's the nature of man. And I think about this a lot because you guys hear me say this. I'm a baby boomer, spoiled brat. All right, that enjoyed all the blessings that people fought for so that I could be a spoiled brat. But I was spoiled kind of in a good way, in the sense that my view of people's human condition is really good. I had parents that lived for their kids, did everything for their kids. Everywhere I went, people honor God and honor his word. So what do you mean it's bad? But the reality is, these are, and Q said this morning, these are God's people. These are his chosen people. And look at what his the condition he has to deal with. Ezekiel has to acknowledge reality. He says in verse 4, the descendants are also impudent and stubborn. I send you to them, and you shall say to them, thus says the Lord God. And whatever they hear or refuse to hear, for they are a rebellious house, they will know that a prophet has been among them. And this is a theme that's going to go through Ezekiel time and time again, a recurring theme. There is no mistake this is God. There is no mistake that the judgment on Israel is of God, and all the nations that God uses to judge Israel are going to be judged. And historically, they all were. But what I'm saying is, this was no spaceship, this was no imagination, this wasn't something that Ezekiel dreamed up and said, hey, I got a good idea. This was a man that was on his path, on his career path, and God took him out of his zeal for what he wanted to do and brought him in touch with the reality that God has. I have a purpose for you. But not only Ezekiel would know that this is from God, everyone would know. And again, I would go back to the Exodus. When Moses led people out of the Exodus, there's no doubt in their mind that this was God leading them out. We have historians today, they can chit-chat all they want about and speculate about historical events. Nobody at that time had any doubt what was going on. Nobody here, over and over again, if you would read through this, you would see there is no doubt that Ezekiel is speaking from God. Verse 6, and you, son of man, be not afraid of them, nor be afraid of their words. Though briars and thorns are with you, and you sit on scorpions, be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, for they are a rebellious house. And you shall speak my words to them, whether they hear or refuse to hear, for they are a rebellious people. And remember, Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet, right? You know why he's called the weeping prophet? Because God told him, you're going to go tell them my message, and that stiff-necked people are not going to listen to you. Wow. And as Bradley brought up this morning in our study, the fact that we have these prophets documented for it is a testament to the amazing providence of God. Because who would, in their right mind, would want to enshrine documents that condemn their own, their own nation? And so, but you're a rebellious people. Verse 8, but you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Be not rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. And he spread it before me, and had writing on it front and back, and there was written words on it of lamentation and mourning and woe. You remember the scene, Miriam? Do you remember this? The scroll? Do you remember when we saw that in Revelation? And everybody was crying because nobody was worthy to take the scroll. Okay? But that scroll was opened by the Lamb. This one is given to Ezekiel, and what's his charge? Eat it. These are my words. You're going to eat it. So, the condition of man here in chapter 2 is that they are stubborn, stiff-necked, right? But not hopeless. But it speaks to us because what do we want to go with the majority? In chapter 3 now, we're going to see the commission. He said to me, son of man, eat whatever you find here. Eat this scroll and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me this scroll to eat. And he said to me, son of man, feed your belly with this scroll that I give you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. And this is where we are, Ron. We come to this point where can't get enough. This is so sweet, Tina, right? When we're eating this up, love it. It tastes so good. It's the very words of life, and it regenerates us, right? But what happens? It really starts to spoil. So he said in verse 4, he said to me, son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. For you are not sent to a people of foreign speech and of a hard language, but to the house of Israel. Man, watch this. Not to many peoples of foreign language or foreign speech and of a hard language, whose words you cannot understand. Surely if I sent you to such, they would listen to you. Isn't that right? We say, no man's a prophet in his own home, right? Or in his own land, right? But listen to you if you're a foreigner and they didn't understand what you would say, they would listen to you. But these people understand you and they're not going to listen to you. Verse 7, but the house of Israel will not be willing to listen to you, for they are not willing to listen to me, because all the house of Israel have a hard forehead and a stubborn heart. Behold, I have made your face as hard as their face, and your forehead as hard as their forehead. I'm going to let you stand up to them. Verse 9, like emery, harder than flint, have I made your forehead. Fear them not, nor be dismayed at their looks, for they are a rebellious house. Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak to you, receive in your heart, and hear with your ears. And go to the exiles, to your people, and speak to them, and say to them, Thus says the Lord God, whether they hear or refuse to hear. Then the Spirit lifted me up. This is in verse 12. And I heard behind me the voice of a great earthquake. Blessed be the glory of the Lord from its place. It was the sound of the wings of the living creatures as they touched one another, and the sound of the wheels beside them, and the sound of a great earthquake. The Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit. The hand of the Lord was being strong upon me, and I came to the exiles at Tel Aviv, who were dwelling by the Chebar Canal. And I sat where they were dwelling, and I sat there overwhelmed among them 7 days. We're given a commission to present the light of the truth of God to a dark world. But does the task overwhelm us? Do you want to say something to the people around you? Because here's the task of a watchman. What Ezekiel's charged with is you got to tell them, even though they're going to scare the heck out of you, because when he says they're a stiff-necked people, they're hard. They're hard-hearted, hard-headed, and but he says if you don't tell them, then I'm going to require it of you. But if you tell them, then you're off the hook. And so here's our challenge. We come to the light of the truth of the gospel, as Peter says, like the day dawning in your heart. 2 Peter Chapter 1. We understand it. We're confronted with the glory of God. It's reasonable. We can't withstand it. Now we start to appreciate the condition of man, the stubborn, rebellious nature of man. But we're overwhelmed with two things. A task, I need to talk to the people that are around me, right? I need to let them know what's going on here, and they reject it. And so how do I get past that? How do I find peace when this word seems so good when it went down? It's life-giving. It gives so much joy, so much rejuvenation and energy. It's truth. It's righteous altogether. And yet, when I try to share it with people, the people that mean most to me, they don't want to hear it. They shut down. But I learned in a business model that if I don't tell them, who will? Right? If I don't bring them the news, who will? Maybe they only will ever hear it from me. But do you know, in that business, not many people that I knew in my family ever heeded what I had to say. Well, they know me. Who's this guy who worked hard and played hard and spent all his days frittering away things? I'm going to listen. I'm going to take advice from him. And then I come to the truth. And I mentioned last week this truth that has the power to turn an angry young man into a tender-hearted, compassionate friend. How does that happen? I talked about Clyde Thompson last week, the meanest man in Texas, and how this book, this storybook, changed his life. But the workshop that's coming up next weekend is one in a series of many. I don't know what it will be like because it's the first time they've changed it from March to October, and they're considering keeping this October time frame. But we'll see. It might determine, or it might depend on the turnout. But to me, there are events that come up that give us opportunity to get around people and hear things that I'm not reaching people that I want to reach. So maybe there's somebody else. Maybe if I can hear somebody else's story, it gets me a little closer. What I determined was to be like Ezekiel, was to consume this word so that even though my arguments and my reasoning doesn't penetrate the people around me right now, as my life continues to change and transform, I hope that has an influence. But one thing's for sure, some people, Tina, in my family that adamantly, vehemently oppose me, no longer argue with me because their arguments don't stand up. But it's taken a long time to get there. Most of the time when we meet together, Jackie, when we come together, a lot of what we're doing is discussing, I'm out there, I'm sharing this, and this is what they said. Okay, here's what we can, right? That's what we come together to build one another up. We're given these opportunities, and these opportunities are here for us to take advantage of them. We're coming into a new season. Well, autumn quickly turns to winter here. And winter's a time where we spend more time at home. I would say, if you haven't, what I like to do, I'm not a very disciplined person. That's my past. I'm kind of just, run where is needed. And it's taken me a long time, but because I know that about myself, I commit to different groups and studies. So if you can commit to a study group or a special time, until you get to the point where you can develop a good discipline. I just had a chance to talk to my niece who just got married and encourage them. I gave them the best gift you could give them. I gave them each a his and her Bible, and told them, boy, if you could be intentional and start your day and start in Proverbs and just have a devotional every morning as husband and wife, what kind of life that could produce for you. But we know these disciplines are kind of difficult to start. But if we get around people like we're going to see this weekend at the workshop, and folks that will be coming here, Speedy and Nancy will be here this week. They'll be spending some time with us. I like getting around these folks. In Ezekiel Chapter 34, if you just wanted to take a moment, maybe this afternoon or this week, and read Ezekiel Chapter 34, what you find is all the horrors. I didn't want to talk to you guys about all the horrors, why God's war wagon was there at this time, and judging Israel. But in chapter 34, he talks about the shepherd. And the shepherd he's talking about is the shepherd, the good shepherd that John talks about in John chapter 10. It's in Ezekiel chapter 34, because anytime, just like the psalmist, and Alan read from a psalm this morning, Psalm 40 is another one. Jeremiah 10:23 says it's not in man to direct his own steps. And Psalm 40 in verse 2 basically tells us that God can lift us out of the miry bog and set our feet on a rock-solid path. So we have opportunities to be engaged. But as we move into the winter months, make a commitment to get into a study, or either a morning or an evening, whatever time is good for you, because I know we're not good, right? I said last week, we're not good at keeping covenants. So we start, it's like the New Year's resolution, right? I'm going to read through this book this year, I'm going to get it. And it starts out good, and we go for a little while, and then we kind of wane a little bit. But we keep going. And so I get encouraged by the people that I deal with and that are showing up and that are so excited about getting into this word. And I can't wait to have these families start congregating here where you guys can be exposed to them, getting inspired by the word of God. We have a great commission, but we get overwhelmed. And you're in good company. Ezekiel was overwhelmed. What do I say? We've seen Elijah, after a great demonstration of God's power, and Elijah, runs away. That's our nature. But God can pick us up. When we come here on the first day of the week, we're going to feed on this memorial supper. But my encouragement today is that we feed on this life-giving word. And here's my ultimate comfort for our future, that God's word will never return void. If we'll put the time in, he will bless us in incredible ways. So we have, God's glory could be, it's a calamity, it's judgment, but also mercy. There is a wrath coming, and not only do we want to get through this life, but we want to see that others can make it through as well. What's amazing to me is God never wavers in his commitment to you. Not once. You think of the thousands of years of history, God has not given up on you. I used to say over and over again, can I really change? God is amazing. Amazing. If you just put the time in. So take advantage of the people that are going to be coming. Do your best to get around them when they're here. Share in their stories, because that's what helps build us up. We need to hear the battle is raging, but it's winning. All right, we're having some success. But the church is alive and well. It's doing well all over the world. What can we do here with God if we'll just commit? So we see the glory of God in the calamity. We see the condition of man. But more importantly, we see our Christian commission to get past the overwhelming, daunting task. How can anybody listen to me? We just take it little by little. Let God build you up. He wants you. He's never given up on us. If you're not where you need to be, if you're not in the kingdom, boy, there's always an opportunity to enter into God's court. But if you're just in a bad place and just need prayer, we all need prayer, then you can come up or afterwards make your request known. We're coming up with some more times where we're going to be meeting together throughout the week. Devos, chapel every morning. I'll give you an update in a little bit about our guests coming here. But if you've got a need, we got a great song of invitation. Come up and make a request known while we sing the song.